Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link. You can click on it, and you'll end up in Zoom. If you click on that link, you'll end up in Mukana, and that's where you become a producer for the show, where you can ask questions and vote those questions up and down as you like. This is really your show. You are running the show by asking those questions. We've got a lot of questions today, and very active morning for us. But feel free to jump in there, ask those questions, and vote those questions up and down. If you think you can answer the questions, we'd love to have you. Now, a lot of times people think that this panel is really smart, and they are. It's like a half a millennia of experience. But, we're all smart in our own individual verticals. So if there's something that you are expert about, just one little specific area, then you add to what the panel can do. So we'd love to have you here. Just need to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for the mic checks. You can get here as early as 6, and in that time you can hang out and talk and check your system, make sure everything's ready to go. First hour is general questions, anything you have questions about around media or virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today we'll be spending just more time discussing the last week or 2 weeks of production. We'll include the questions that have come in general questions, but we'll just keep talking about it throughout the second hour. Tomorrow we'll have our second hour, or really the third and fourth hour, will be we're going to do 2 hours of Q&A on Saturdays now because we keep on going towards that anyway. And then from 9 to 11, I may have the times wrong in the email. I'll correct that today. But the 9 to 11 we'll do, or 9 to 10:45 or so, we'll do the education hour. That's not put on YouTube right now, and probably won't be for a little while as we work through some stuff there. So we're not going to post recordings of that while we do some nuts and bolts there. And then Sunday is just a general, we just keep talking. so that's kind of the structure there. We're going to, for those second hours, we'll probably slow down just a little bit for the next week as we kind of re-gear. We did a really hard push over the last 2 weeks to figure some stuff out. And now we're going to back up a little bit and then start adding things slowly over the next 2 or 3 months into a different kind of show for the second hour and a little bit different for the first hour. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Go ahead, Bill.
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night for those of you in various time zones around the world. We start with a friend of the show, Emily Russo, who's been a part of the education panel for a long time in Red Hook. And Emily asks, is there an easy way to share a Keynote with non-Mac users where it can be viewed and links can be clicked, but Keynote can't be downloaded? I tried iCloud embed in my website, and it was so slow to load.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, it is iCloud embed. That's what I use, and it does work fast. It might be something more to do with your website. And so if you connect with me in Discord, I can look at your website and look at how you actually connected it, because that way is the easy way of making it, fully compatible for anyone to look.
It may also be the size of your images. So it will want to get way ahead and load everything in. So if you have a lot of really large images, it might take a little longer for it to get activated. Go ahead, Bill.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. The new Logitech Scribe AI-powered whiteboard camera looks interesting, but expensive. Logitech will be demonstrating it over Zoom, which will be even more interesting. Could this revitalize the good old whiteboard?
Hopefully not. Sorry, it's I am just so against the whiteboard because this, why are we turning around? Why do we want to turn around? And I will admit, I've had 10 years of doing this. So we built versions of this 10 years ago, and I've been using it since. And I have to tell you, I can just tell you from the future. I'm just going to come back from the future and tell you that once you get used to this, of doing a telestrator, you're never going to go back to a whiteboard because you have to turn around and lift your arm and look over your shoulder. It's a horrible camera angle, and so the whole thing is just foobar, and so, to do that, once you get used to doing this, and this costs less than that. That's $1,100 for something to do that. And, Microsoft's got their Surface and their monitor and everything else, but why would you turn your back to your audience? And why would you change your state? There's a whole bunch of things, if you want to put your Keynote and have it coming up in front of you, and you want to be able to jump to different sources, and you want to be able to do all those things, as you start getting good at multiple source merging into the system, drawing on things, moving things around, you can't do that and keep walking all over the place. It's just and I get that's, but that's like old, new wine and old wine skins. So I'm sorry. The whole whiteboard thing, I know that people are desperate to go back to their little whiteboards, but this will become the norm. And then people will look back as why did we waste our time on that? Go ahead, Jesse.
So your setup is a little more sophisticated than what I can do. But if people want to be able to do whiteboard without having to buy a tablet, like I believe Ken has demonstrated, if you have an ATEM, you just can go out from your iPad using Keynote to Sketch. And it's not, you could even key it the way you do, or you could just put the white sheet.
If you just want a whiteboard, you can do an iPad or even your phone with an HDMI out with Keynote and draw on it. I mean, you don't need, so if you just want pure whiteboard, it's easy. Telestrator is nicer, but I'm just saying that like whiteboard is just cut to a Keynote. And what I do when I don't have this system, I literally just cut to Keynote and I put 40 blank slides in, and then I just swipe with my hand and keep drawing. And so you can just sit there and just draw whatever you want on Keynote, and there's your whiteboard. And again, it's not some expensive thing that you can put in your conference room. It just works all the time. And I think that as people keep on moving forward, as people get equipped with this stuff, we spend a lot of money on people's chairs and on their desks and on their lights and on their, all the things that it costs money to have employees do things. As we start to get to the employees, especially the ones that have to actually present, giving them the tools that they need in their office or at home or whatever is going to greatly increase. I just did a demo. I had to give some feedback this morning before the show for some animation stuff that we're working on. I literally just hit a Supersource, and I'm sitting next to it because I'm talking about facial animation, and I'm sitting there talking about it. I just recorded it really quickly and sent it. It took me 3 minutes, and it wasn't a long email. It wasn't, whatever. And that kind of thing is going to greatly improve what we're doing as soon as we move, past these legacy ideas. Next question.
Comes to us from the show friend Hasmuk Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. Keynote and Luma key with Huddlecam as an HDMI camera. Use Luma upstream on the ATEM. Video with Huddlecam. Okay, but not happy. As soon as Luma key is activated, the video is just horrible. Anybody have an idea what's up with that?
I think you're Luma keying the video over top of the Keynote instead of the other way around. So I think that the only reason, there's no reason for it to be affected by it. The only other reason that you would have for a Luma key to not work is just not having your clip region in the right place. So if the clip is higher, and you got to turn off pre-multiplication. So if there's pre-multiply on a Luma key, it's using the Keynote image to key it. If the whole thing just as an alpha channel. So what you want to do is turn off that pre-multiply, and then you want to turn your clip way down, and then you start moving from the far right with your gain and start pulling that back until it all clears up. So hopefully that helps. If you maybe jump on sometime and show us what the problem is, and we might be able to help you with that. I hear a beep from somebody. Someone beeping. Next question.
Moving on, Johnny Estias, coming to us from Manila in the Philippines, says, buying an X32 Rack and X-DANTE card for online events. Last week, my Dante card shipped, but the X32 Rack is still out of stock. Should I consider getting an X32 full-size, compact, or producer if one becomes available? And if so, what would be the advantages?
Go ahead, Karl.
Okay, so the difference between the X32s, so the full size has 24 faders and a master section, which is...
I was going to interrupt you. Well, he just did that in real time. I just want to point out that he just did that in real time. Okay, go ahead, Karl.
Okay, so I'll go through them quickly, but this is because a lot of people may be interested in this. So yeah, 24 faders on the full size, and you have a master section on the right hand side, and you have a full size display. The compact has the same size display, a smaller master section, and 16 faders. The producer is rack mountable. It also has 16 faders, but has a much smaller master section and a much smaller display. The rack version is the smallest of all and the cheapest of all. It has no faders, no master section, and the same small display, and that's in the producer. Around the back, this is where it gets a little bit different. So the full size has 32 in and 16 out. The compact, the rack, and the producer all share the same 16 in, 8 out. They all share the same auxiliary in outs, and they all share the same card in out. So you can put your Dante card in any of these. They all have parity in that regards as well.
That was perfect. so like that when we talk about the future of office hours, that's what we're trying to get to, is like for a lot of the technical questions that, like my idea is watching what Karl's doing. I keep on thinking, every third or fourth question should have something like that. And we want to put together a little team that's doing what Karl's doing, so Karl doesn't have to do all of them. But incredible work. But that also shows you the power of you're using Keynote, right, for that, Karl, with auto, I imagine with the auto alpha, which makes it a little easier to kind of throw those things together. It's great. I've owned all of those switchers, all those mixers. The big advantage of the rack is that it's all in a rack. And so you get it in there, you get it all wired up. You don't have anything GAC coming out of the rack. You don't have to have a snake. You don't have to have other things like that. You don't have a slider. So we usually use X touches to run the sliders that we want in that area. So it's a little bit more expensive. It's less expensive, but you end up spending almost the same amount of money to get that out there. My favorite one outside of that, if you're in a studio, we've used the full-size rack. And then the full-size X32 in a studio environment, so you have more control. On the road, my favorite one is the producer because it's rack mountable. We put them in and slide them out of a case, and it works really nicely. And then you can keep it largely gacked in there as well. You can rack it up. You can have all your XLRs going into it that you need, and then you pull it. You can just literally slide it out and start to work with it. So you have one of those in one rack, and then you have a 1ME. Switcher on the other rack, and you kind of have a little production unit. So, but the one that I bought the most by far is the rack, the X32 rack, just because we like it to be in there and compact, and a lot of times we're controlling it remotely. So, next question.
We need to have a second hour called Fixing the GAC Out of Your Rack. That would be fun.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
Tim Holmes of San Lorenzo is up next with, what are some of your favorite online places to purchase gear, and why do you prefer them over others?
Go ahead, Jesse.
So I'm looking for expertise and return policy. On the expertise side, guy over at the DVE store is amazing. B&H also is very expert. And then Amazon has great return policies if it's a prime item.
And go ahead, Karl.
So for anyone outside of the United States, B&H has an excellent shipping policy and a return policy for international orders. I've had to return some stuff from Australia, and they've done really well with that. For stuff from Europe, Thomann, they do some video equipment from Thomann as well. I understand in the UK it's a bit harder, so Andertons would be better in the UK, and some people in the United States are finding Andertons a better place to buy from in the UK because it's in stock.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, Thomann as well. I'm in the UK and I still use Thomann even after all the Brexit stuff. But in the UK, CVP is really good. And one of the things I learned over the last year is just email them. Don't go with the prices online. Build a relationship with one of the sales reps, and you often get a much better price and relationship.
I think the four major places that I order is I order from Guy at the DVE store, mostly because I just know I'm going to talk to somebody and something's going to happen really quickly, and if something's wrong, it's just going to get handled, And so DVE store is probably, I will go there first to buy stuff, and then for me, the next place I generally go is Amazon. See if it's on Amazon, just because it's just really easy for me to do the order. What's interesting is that just the order process is a little faster than B&H. So, just because it's built, B&H is just a couple more clickety clicks to do it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so B&H, but that small amount, B&H has some things that I just can't get at Amazon. And then the other one that I use for a lot of the heavy duty, for a lot of my heavy-duty audio stuff, I order from Sweetwater. And the reason I do that is because I can talk to Robert at Sweetwater, and he and I will sit there and I'll just talk to him about what I need. And he'll come back with a bunch of stuff. I mean, Sweetwater is probably, when it comes to audio, they just have real experts. And you feel like those guys are always, they're always like studying and figuring stuff out, and they know everything about their gear. And so when I really need to, when I don't know what I want to buy, in audio, I'll order it from Sweetwater, because I can sit there and have a conversation with folks that you feel like that's all they do is think about audio. And so those are the four that I generally order from. And then Marketech for some knickknacks that I need that aren't available anywhere else. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to second that on Sweetwater. My wife does voiceovers, and we have a sales rep there, and he's always like kind of checking in every couple months, what are your needs and stuff. And also OWC. I love going to OWC for hard drives, because they will always swap them out real quick if there's any failures.
Jason?
One last thing. Monoprice for cheap cables.
I order a lot of stuff. I am surprised at how much more I'm ordering from Monoprice. I make a lot of my cables, but I will not make Ethernet cables. I hate that. I just hate it. And they're so cheap on Monoprice, and they just work. And so I won't. I don't want to have any part of that. I'm buying what I think is interesting is that Monoprice is moving upscale with a lot of their electronics. They just keep on adding things. Like I'm wiring it in right now, and it works great so far. I have this. I ordered an 8x8 HDMI matrix so that I can copy some of my monitors that are going to my ATEM. Costs as much as the ATEM, but I find it interesting that Monoprice is doing that. I have a 4-up splitter that I got from them, and I'm even looking at, they have an AVR that does XLR out instead of speaker out for 60 up to 16 channels, which I'm interested in because I want to have more. I want to be able to push Atmos at the channel level into Dante, and so I can do that with that process. And so anyway, it's I'm surprised every time I go up there that they've got something new and interesting there. Next question.
Johnny Estias is back from Manila with another uprated question, and it is been using Windows version of Zoom Room to screen scrape guests for online events. However, I keep seeing a pop-up on the top right indicating who is speaking. Is there a way to turn that off?
I don't know if there is. We usually scale past it. So in our Zooms we scale past that when we're using it as a record. But I don't know. Anyone know any way to get rid of that? I don't think there is. I think we would call that, as Greg Gibson would call, debris. Screen debris. I love that. He has the new term. Beju.
I believe if you have one of the monitors designated as active speaker or gallery view, you don't get the pop-up on the other screen if you have someone pinned on that. Mm-hmm. Then you just get to the 107 zoom in and just get rid of everything else.
That's great, Jeffrey.
Yeah, if you end up doing the 2-screen thing, then the video should pop up in a little film strip, and you can move that to a third monitor if you have that set up, and then that won't pop up on the top corner.
Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae out of Dallas, Texas. NBC has selected AT&T Global Video Services to transport coverage of the Olympics from Tokyo. Is AT&T a typical provider in this space? And who would the other contenders have been? Pun intended.
So AT&T, that's a different kind of AT&T than what we're used to when we think about our cell phones or our cable service. AT&T provides, high-end backhaul. So I think there's another question later about the switch, and the switch uses AT&T and Verizon in their backbones to make those things available. So there is the consumer version of AT&T, and then there's the industrial version of AT&T, which is an entirely different level of service than what you're used to. And so they're common. Other ones that, now I can't think of who owns Level 3 now, but Level 3 is another type of vendor in that area. There is, I'm trying to think of other ones that we've used.
What about MCI?
Well, is MCI still around? I thought that
I don't know, but
MCI
used to be part of the backbone.
Would have been part of that. I think they've been absorbed in a bunch of different ways to make that work. And so there are, a variety of them. I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but Level 3 is the one that we've used a lot, or whoever they became part of, or whoever they bought to do that. Cogent is another one. JJ would probably be able to tell us more if he was here about all the different ones that you can do that with. But those are backbone services that provide industrial grade solutions. Usually there are many levels of backup, so there's, they might be, passing that data in 2 or 3 different ways across the world to make sure that, you have 5 nines of what they call 5 nines of stability, or 9 nines or 7 nines. That means 99.9999, level of stability. So they'll tell you it's 5 nines or 7 nines or 9 nines or, whatever they want to say about reliability to make sure that your data is going to get there at the speed that you're asking for it. Next question.
Someone named Haywood of Brentwood says, during your WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference from Apple coverage, your greatest asset, the participants, were locked in the lobby, unable to interact with the WWDC panelists other than through Mukana. What steps are you taking to increase the interaction with the panelists?
That's a good question. So a couple things. One is that generally the participants are locked into watching what we do in a webinar. So usually there's only a handful of us up here. There's more than what we had last night, but there's only a handful of us, and a lot of people are watching. They're either watching on YouTube or they're watching inside of Zoom, but they're not interacting directly other than through Mukana. So that's not that different than what we do on a day-to-day basis. As far as the panel goes, we did that morning invite anybody who wanted to come to join. Jason did. Jason showed up, but no one else did. So there was so the panel was invited. It wasn't that we left people out. The panel was invited. We didn't do it on the first day because we had some issues with the interaction back and forth between the panel and the main the guests that we were bringing in. We had interaction issues on Friday, and I didn't have confidence on Monday that we could pull it off. So the intention was always to have the panel be part of that piece, and technically, because Justine was on, to be honest with you, I mean, Justine and Renee, those two bring in a lot of views and everything else, and I just didn't, for those two people, I wanted to make sure that we weren't like in some kind of rolling car wreck, of audio, trying to figure out why this wasn't going back and forth. So between those two people, I decided to not take any chances. And the second one, we were ready to take chances, but no one came. so it seems like everyone was happy just listening to it. I think talking to some folks later, it sounded like just a developer discussion. They weren't sure exactly where they would fit into that discussion. So I think that probably made sense. But we definitely plan to have it be more interactive. We will have second hours where there are less people, because if you look at a lot of our second hours when we bring a guest in, we really only have 3 or 4 people interacting. So it's not changing the structure of that as much as it's just giving us better video of what we're doing there. In fact, the problem you really get into is, and this has to do with more of inclusiveness to our viewers, is when panelists interrupt during a second hour, they're bypassing Mukana and basically excluding the online viewers. And that's why I don't like it, is because I want everyone to use the same Q&A system together so that everyone I'm trying to actually have the panelists on the same level as the attendees. And so that's the intention, is actually inclusiveness, not exclusiveness in that area, is to do that. So I think it's a great question. I think that's going to keep on coming up as we keep on doing it. What we are going to see is that, again, there's going to be a version of this show that continues to get shinier. The second hour specifically, and some of these special events are going to be different. They're going to, and they're not going to be the same. But that we're always going to balance that with, there's a pre-show and there's a post-show ran all day yesterday. So, like the post-show ended, and where we're going, as soon as we have the structure set up, the post-show will start right after the show ends, and then we'll stop right before the pre-show of this show. So that's going to happen over the summer. So there's actually going to be more opportunity for people to interact and so on and so forth. That said, the show itself will become shinier, and look cooler. There's an opportunity for us to really push the market forward, and also for us to increase our market, the force we have on the market to move things forward. As we have more people, when there's 3,000 or 4,000 people watching live, when we can move that. We saw that, like, we moved Universe, which is that controller, very quickly to work with Liminal, because of all of us just kind of deciding to do something all at one time. So when we have 3,000 or 4,000 people showing up every day, when we have 30,000 or 40,000 on a mailing list, and we decide to all move at the same time, the industry starts looking the way we're pushing it down the path, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to do that, and for the people who are on the panel. There's a lot of opportunity. Go ahead, Alex, and then Courtney.
Firstly, I didn't stay right to the end for the post-mortem, but I thought Jason looked really good compared with everybody else in terms of contributing and representing us. That was great. I really like that.
I wanted more of our panel. The goal was to get 6 or 7 people from our panel, and a lot of that, and I felt like Jason, came on and really saved us in some cases, because he just understands the cadence, and so he was able to be more aggressive about it. And what was great for what happened there was that Jason was able to jump in immediately and start talking, and it gave the developers and it gave Andy a little time to think, and so and let them kind of mull through that and then answer if they chose to, because and so I think that, to your point, I think that worked well. Go ahead, Alex, continue.
And another thing is, it would be really nice to understand a little bit more about the technology of what you're doing, so that if I or others want to give feedback, we're coming up with reasonable proposals as opposed to things that are like not actually possible. So I don't know if there could be some kind of document or video or some kind of thing
at some point
what you've settled on. It would be
right
really
now,
useful for me.
Nothing's settled yet. so and I don't want us to limit too much of how. We'll tell you whether we can do it right now, but it'll only be that we can or cannot do it right now. My goal, again, my end state that I'm trying to get to is Vision and Atmos, at 4K, for us by September, and every day, just like that, we just turn it on and it works. Now, we may not be able to do that from a cost perspective of just the bandwidth, because YouTube doesn't support Vision, so I'd have to put it on Akamai, and then that would become a thing. And so I'm trying to figure that out, but. And then what we're really working on with Liminal and with Andy Carluccio is building a show that is the broadcast is undoable in broadcast. And so that has to do with taking advantage of Zoom ISO, Zoom OSC, a lot of the, all of those things. So we're going to be working on, and we're going to constantly open for input from everybody. Oh, it would be really great. We were talking about that more and more, of what would be great in the show of related to metadata and being able to find the questions and be able to ask the questions, display the questions, put all those things together, over time. So, it'll take, we'll be developing this. It'll change every month now. Like we're kind of moving past the gestation stage, and now we're going to start going into the active stage.
And one more thing. Is it possible to actually have a metadata embedded in for the previous search to say who answered questions as well as who asked them, and that kind of stuff too?
Soon, yeah. Because what's going to happen is that we're working on redesigning the panelist system so that the panelists can raise their hand. You don't have to do what Courtney and Taylor are doing right now. They can just raise their hand digitally, and then that's going to tag all that stuff as it goes through of when they were selected and everything else. It'll also let us build Supersources automatically, because once we have that data, we hit go and it just places them out, and it can even place them in order of the order that I gave them to answer the question. So it'll have a lot of things that again will kind of mess with broadcasters' heads, because we're kind of mixing again human and computer interaction in a way that I haven't seen before. I mean, I've seen a lot, but so we're going to keep on pressing the outer envelope of what that looks like. And again, the reason that we can do that is because of the investment and the time that the panelists have put into this, in looking good and sounding good. There was no reason to do it when it was a bunch of little webcams, and so our built-in webcams. I mean, now we have at least Brios for most people here, and people that keep on moving their audio and video quality up, and that makes it possible for us to do what we're doing. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Taylor.
Yeah, I think it is important to get reaction from the panelist, or the peanut gallery, as we call ourselves here, other than the six-up, the main professionals, or whoever you're interviewing in the second hour, because a lot of times even entering your questions through Mukana is a good practice, but a lot of times they will answer, and you'll want them to expound on something that they said, but you can't. If you can't jump in at that point in time, the delay of entering it in Mukana saying, "Can you explain more about this?" It may never even come up before the end of the show. So
right, and and as the shows get bigger and tighter, it just may be something that gets lost a little bit in that process. But you're right, and the idea though is that when we do that, we bring in this handful of panelists that would make the most difference, and they're in that six-up, able to ask the person to expound on it, but it might not be the general panel that does that. So when we brought in, when we did remotely possible, is that right? Remotely possible. Last week, we brought in a handful of people that were most connected to it to talk to those things. And when we do audio ones, we may bring in 6 or 8 people from that are known as kind of the audio folks within our group to be in that interview to do exactly what you're talking about. We may not open it to the whole panel to interrupt that process, but we will open it to some key people. And so we just have to, because we're also trying to build a viewable show. Again, we were ready to throw to the panel last night. I mean, we spent most of the day yesterday getting ready so that if people said that they wanted to play, that we could jump to the panel, and then no one showed up. So most of our work yesterday didn't go anywhere. So we're definitely clear that that's something we want to to include over time. Go ahead, Taylor.
Alex, I just wanted to provide you some feedback. The level of knowledge you were asking for yesterday to join this show seemed a little high for WWDC, and maybe that was on purpose, but that kind of shied me away because I didn't have the confidence level of the knowledge that you were asking for.
and I thought that was valid. I knew that there's some folks here that are developers, and so it was open to that, but I did, it was a more vertical solution than normal. Go ahead, Jesse.
So I know you're working on it, but once the audio chain loops back in, then we don't have to watch it delayed, there's this whole disconnect between us and the peanut gallery, and then we're watching it delayed. So if you ever were to come out to one of us,
we wouldn't come out. We wouldn't come out to the quote unquote peanut gallery, and we don't do that now. Like, we don't. The reason that we had this odd interaction because we don't go out and bring people in from the webinar at the moment, right? We have a set number of panelists that are tested and ready to go, and so on and so forth as we go into it. So the reason that we're in this odd situation is that webinar doesn't have a breakout function. So the reason that we went to meetings is because we want to. Now the main reason we did meetings is so that the guests that came through could come and hang out with all of you for a little while. We thought that would be fun to have, Renee and Justine and the developers all say hi and be part of it and everything else. So we did that specifically to include our group so they could see our group and not just have it be a show. And then we pulled them in through that into the breakout room. So that was an intention, that's why we did that specific piece rather than having them completely separate from all of you. The goal was to have them come through and say hi. And we had a pretty good, some success, in that area. And then, but once we go into the show, we wouldn't go, the people who were just watching, we wouldn't go back to them for a variety of reasons. But, I guess from my perspective, everyone's synced. The key is that everyone's watching. There'll be a point where the Zoom viewing will go away, and you'll just watch the show, but everyone's in the same time, even if that time is 12 seconds behind or 15 seconds behind, everyone's talking about it at the same time. And if you look at the latency of the questions, it doesn't matter, because we're already minutes or hours behind the show. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Jason, and then George.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up, and several people in the chat beat me to it, and they're pinging me now. Jason Fitzgerald and Eric Price point out that perhaps it would be a good idea to assign someone like a social media organizer, like you do on Mad in the Kitchen, to monitor the chat, because that way the chat is fast enough to interact to ask a follow-up question from anyone in the webinar, whether they're panelists or not. And if it seems important enough or it gets enough likes in the chat, then the social media director could pose that question to any of the panelists to follow up on something. That would give immediate reaction.
It can
cover a question before you leave that topic.
Yeah, and it can. I think the other thing you have to look at from a pure program perspective. When we think about the general audience, we're also moving at a certain velocity. So we're gonna, dig through those questions and figure those things out, and then just move on to the next thing because we have so many. Now, last night we had plenty of time to chew on things, but we left 40 questions on the field on Monday. And so there's going to be a point where we're dealing with those questions, but we may not keep on stopping to go back in the same way that there are times in this show where I just cut people off. Like there's more hands, and I just go, okay, we're moving on to the next thing because I've decided for the general viewer, we've hit the core of that answer, and we're just going to keep moving. And so those are things that as we get bigger, we're going to have to get thick-skinned about the fact that we're not going to get to every question, we're not going to get to every person, and that's just the nature of the show. Jason, and then George.
Yeah, about 20 minutes into last night's show, I thought, I really am starting to worry that this is turning into the me show starring me, and I really didn't want to do that because it was such an amazing panel. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, I've done enough broadcasting to know if Alex has heard enough, he'll cut me off.
Yeah,
that's just how it works.
And that's important for our panelists is to get good at getting cut off. So like people say, well, how can you be on? Leo cuts you off all the time. And I'm like, that's his job. That's his job. Like Leo's job is to cut me off. And if I see Leo interrupt me, unless I'm really trying to finish something, I will immediately drop back. And that's part of what makes MacBreak work is that we know that we're just filling time for Leo, and we are at his service to do that. And that's the hard part for panelists sometimes is to understand that, and to also understand that you can keep talking if you're not being interrupted. But the key is to learn what the host is doing to cut you off, and then not step over that. That's how you don't get asked again. Is when you step over, when a host goes, when I come in and cut somebody off or I interject something, the interjection is usually to end that. Because when you're talking yourself, you don't realize how long you've been talking or that you're now way off the field. And so the host will sit there and pull you back by just changing the subject or moving or interjecting. But that interjection is to end your sharing. And so if you were doing well, they wouldn't do that. So you just have to. So what I do with Leo is to learn how to do that, and when he's interjecting, to jump out of there. Go ahead, George.
First of all, great job last night, Jason. I think pretty much last night was great. What I wanted to toss in as one who runs a community in the DC area, this is a pretty huge community, and I wanted to remind all of us that when Alex is off stage, we need to kind of defend the home front. There's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of us are not here every day, and we want to make sure that when Alex is not here, you might have an OG or someone come in and I don't want to say it gets a little disruptive, but we want to make sure that everyone stays comfortable in this community. If you don't, Alex is preaching to us every day what's going on and what the shift that's happening. I mean, not all of us are going to shift to that panel, but we need to make sure that if we have anyone come in and it gets a little bit disruptive, we kind of address it. Alex doesn't necessarily have to address it, but we need to address folks that are coming in on the aftermath and kind of let them know what's going on. Most of you that were here last night know what I'm talking about, but I don't need to rehash it. But we just need to make sure that we keep the home front solid.
Yeah, and we've grown a lot to make that work. So I definitely appreciate that. Absolutely. Next question.
Comes to us from Grant Whitehead, our friend from Adelaide, Australia, who's often on the panel. You have a corporate virtual event to design and produce. 200 global employees would normally all meet in person. A studio will need all 200 to be seen. Tech and swag gifts will be sent to each person. $800,000 USD total budget. What would you do?
Go ahead, Tim.
I think just send them a really good kit, like maybe even just as simple as a Brio, a light kit, a PR40, some kind of interface with a mic arm. I mean, you would be under $1,000 probably for each person. And you also just kind of introduce an excellence to the company, maybe a setup video, something like that. I think most people would think that was a pretty awesome swag kit to get, and then you're only at $200,000 out of that whole budget.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I would invest in everybody's setup because they're going to use it. It's not, you're not wasting it on production like that goes into a one event. You're basically equipping 200 people to look good and sound good on all of their meetings from then on. So, I would take that even further and, really give them a good backdrop and a cool company backdrop or something they can customize with a little light or something like that. So they can kind of make it their own, but it's also like a gray screen, maybe with a light that like we're doing here. They can kind of customize their color and we can have
no step and repeat, right?
No step and repeat, please. No, just don't do it. Step and repeat. The 80s called and they want their backgrounds back. So, so step and repeat is just the worst. Anyway, and it's really bad for your compression. Just in case you're wondering, step and repeat is not only does it look garish and infantile, but it actually screws up your compression because it'll focus all the data in the behind you and then make you softer in the front. And you see that a lot in live streams. Go ahead, Jesse.
This is a question for you. That seems like a really generous budget. Is that typical for these type of events?
Not for 200, but when we send out kits, our kits are anywhere. The base kit for us is about $2,500. $2,500 to $3,000 is the one that we rent it. We don't send them. Oh, some people keep them, but that gives us remote control, and it's got a mixed pre and a Countryman and lights and that's the small kit. The big kit's like $15,000.
I was actually referring to 800,000 to produce the event. Feels more. Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like that's, I mean, for a big corporate event, especially a global event, 800,000 wouldn't be that big of a deal. $250,000, $500,000, million, those are all relatively reasonable numbers for those kinds of things. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, just wondering, would you try and keep the equipment price, around, lower and then spend time on training, or try and even that out a wee bit? Because 200 people trying to train them all how to use Zoom well and use all the mics well and use a camera well,
I still think you could do that.
Lot of time. 200
people. I mean, it's a lot of people, but it's not that many people. So it's you're looking at we'll just say roughly 200 hours, which is 200 hours of stuff, which is 5 people working all week. On setting them up. You need an instruction on how to set it up, and then you need to sit down with them and do those things and make sure that it works. But generally, it makes a dramatic difference in the quality of the event. And it'll also make a dramatic difference in the quality of every event after that. And so that's the and again, I would keep on spending into that. I would personally spend probably half the budget. Or even more than half the budget just on the quality of their how they're connecting, especially if you're planning to make them center stage and then build the rest of the production around that. But I think that because again it'll affect how your whole company it would affect the whole company for the years to have to up the quality of how each person connects to each other. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just quickly to say when the budget is proper like that, and the equipment is that high, it is much easier to train them and to do it. Yeah. When you're trying to do it with lesser equipment, that's when the time is taken with each individual to get it right.
Yeah. Next question.
Husmuck's back from Cape Town with this. When recording into the cloud, a Zoom meeting, will it record only the main room? If there's a breakout room and people are sent there, does that record, or does it need another separate record to capture that?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, within that specific question, breakout rooms are not recorded, so you'd need a computer in each breakout room recording locally. But Zoom also does have some very granular controls upon what the cloud does record. So unless it's clicked on specifically, it won't record gallery view, it will only record speaker view. So you have to be just careful what the cloud settings are. But to record breakout rooms, no, you need a computer in each room or a person in each room recording locally.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas, says name brand chairmaker Herman Miller seems to be bolstering up its work from home marketing. What other non-tech brands are we seeing going after the emerging work from home market?
Go ahead, Karl.
IKEA has done a massive push in this area in advertising around the world as far as setting up home offices. So that's what I've seen.
Yeah, good, Ken.
Yeah, the reason why Herman Miller are doing such a push is because lots of less office chairs are being sold. So that's why they're moving to them up. And so there's a lot of office furniture companies who are doing that, who are now moving to getting people working from home.
I think there's I've seen a glut of Herman Miller. I bought a Herman Miller chair recently and new, but I almost bought, there's a huge glut of Herman Miller chairs on eBay because there's all these companies that are, going virtual and they're just getting rid of all those chairs, and they're great, by the way, used or new. Anyway, go ahead, George.
Herman Miller, you can't really beat it. I mentioned this a couple of days ago. I actually had my chair. They came out last week and raised my chair an inch and 3/4. You might not think that's a lot, but I could raise my chair to the center of my my teleprompter now. So if you have a Herman Miller, you could get it raised a few more inches to get you up to screen center.
And mostly I just was realizing that I spent so much time with all of you, and then I spent in meetings all day, and you do end up with some back issues if you're not careful. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
That's good to know, George, because I have a stool style chair. I've been noticing a lot of, webcams and stuff like that. I think it's more overstocked than anything. They bought a lot and now they got to get rid of it. But also, people are starting to figure out, well, I need to create a space now in my home for the conference call, for the interview, for stuff like that. So they're trying to figure out what they need and how to take up as little space as possible in whatever room they're doing this in.
Well, and one of the things that I was just talking to a friend of mine that moved out of the Bay Area and moved out of a small apartment, and they said, well, now I have a space I have a whole extra room. Well, they evidently have an extra 3 or 4 rooms now that they moved to the Midwest with a fast connection. They moved, where they picked was where there's Google Fiber. And so so now they have a gig connection up and down, and they have.
Was that your Kentucky reference?
No, it wasn't Kentucky. No, but they had a. But anyway, it was they. So they went to all they cared about was bandwidth. So they get fast bandwidth, and then they were able to buy a house with their California money. They sold their house and bought another one with cash. Like literally, they have no debt, and they have a house that's twice as big, and they're now working there. And when the company said you have to come back, they said, "Hey, I'm not coming back." And the company said, "You have to come back." And they said, "No, I'll quit." And then they said, "Okay, you can stay." So they were pretty good at what they do. Anyway, go ahead, Mark.
Herman Miller also just merged with Knoll Furniture, so they have a lot more furniture now to try and sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila is back with this one. Has anyone in the panel used Singular.Live? It's a cloud-based live graphics overlay service. Been using it with my ATEM Mini Extreme with an upstream chroma key.
I have not. People bring this up a couple times, every once in a while, and I go, "Oh, I should check that out," and I just haven't gotten to it. Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I would say the Affinity Designer. I think it's still half price. It's ridiculous, like £30-40 or something. That's the tool to learn that rather than any of these offlines.
I think that the issue here, though, is that this will let you kind of build. A lot of us are used to having a lot of graphics available to us, and this lets you build them dynamically and have them all set up for it. So this isn't as much of a design as being able to have really a broadcast input. It's something that we should look at, because one of the things that it's great that we have our own lower third web view for office hours or for Mukana, but I think that, and it's something I think Aaron actually suggested, is that we figure out a way to sync Mukana into office hours. So like Mukana into Singular, and so we're gonna take a closer look at that. Next question.
Hasmuk is back from Cape Town again, and this time he says office hours iterations is really getting confusing. Courtney's question shed some partial light, still half in the dark. Watching YouTube recording of morning office hours, the second hour had a Supersource view and then a normal office hour grid view. Then a panelist was brought into things. Any thoughts of taking the non-broadcast off? Oh, that's the next question. I'm sorry. Kind of petered out there.
He ran out of words. Ran out of characters. It's going to be confusing for a little while. Like one of the things that we're working on pretty hard is to have the first hour always still stay stable. So we're screen scraping, so it's a higher resolution, but what we're not doing is necessarily changing the first hour's structure very much, other than making it look a little nicer. But the second hour we'll keep on playing with. And again, it's going to back up a little bit for the next couple of weeks, because we have to, now that we know what was possible, we're going to back up, do something pretty normal for a couple of weeks, and then start experimenting again in July. The end goal will be to have a show that really looks like a show. And again, it changes the stature of the group inside of our industry. If we start producing a show that is significantly higher quality than the rest of broadcast, which we are capable of at this point, it changes the way people look at office hours. It changes the way when we ask people to come talk to us, and I'll be, less opaque about this. I think that we can replace what we get out of IBC and NAB from our own homes by having the stature that we get to a point where we can call anybody and say, hey, we'd like you to come on and show your new product, or hey, we'd like to have, dig into this here. And they want to launch their products here. They want to talk to us here. And the way to do that is that we have to up the ante, in what we're doing. Some people will get just looking at a Zoom thing that's streaming to YouTube, but a lot of people aren't going to get that. What we want to do is get something that everyone gets. You know, like this is a big show. This is a shiny show that people want to be on. You know, because that kind of show, a really, really high quality show about broadcast tools, doesn't exist. And so it barely exists in broadcast anymore, but it definitely doesn't exist in our vertical. So if we get to a point where it's significantly higher quality, and what's great about it is we're gonna blend that in with the fact that we have great conversation too. You know, so we have a lot of smart folks. We have a lot of great conversation that's active. And then we're going to add the quality to it at the same time, you know. And we had to develop the conversation first. There was no reason. We didn't want to get caught up in what people get distracted in is they want to put all those graphics in first, and then they're spending so much time worrying about the logistics of the graphics and the logistics of that process that they don't focus on the conversation. We spent 400 and some. Getting good at the conversation. Now we're going to add the graphics, and there's going to be a little bit of we're going to add the graphics. We're going to add more support. We're going to have, if you look at what Karl's doing, that's going to be for like every third, show. I mean, it'll be a great show to watch, and you can just turn it on your TV, and it's going to look like dynamite, and that's good for the people that are in the panel, because they're going to be seen by a lot more people, and if their quality is high, if their quality is low, they're going to be seen by a lot more people, and that will not be good for the people in the panel. So that's one of the reasons that I'm encouraging people to turn up their quality, is not just for the show, but it's for them to make sure that they represent themselves well in front of a larger and larger number of people. And so us getting good at being, no one's ever had this many panelists all kind of come up to speed together, to understand how to have that conversation. So we have a very unique opportunity that I don't think anyone's ever had before to do this. And I think it can give us as a group, a real, we can be very effective, in moving the industry forward with what we're doing. So it's a unique opportunity, and there'll be some rocks I'm not flat out tell you, summer's going to be like, oh, that didn't work. And we've been doing that the whole time, but in small ways. And this way it's going to be, but again, when we start really actively moving stuff down the path, it's going to get pretty interesting. And again, the numbers will get bigger. And again, I think that every day, the goal is that every day, the second hour will be, the first hour will still be great. We may even make it longer. We'll see. And then the second hour, though, will be something that no one wants to miss ever. Like it'll just be this, we've got the person that you want to do, an artist coming in to play music for us, whatever, like all those things are happening, roundtable discussions within in here, and people, and it's aggressive. And we're slowly moving towards that, and people signing up to be part of the crew is a big piece of that as well. So that'll be rocky too. We have 200 people that said they want to help. As we integrate that, there'll be things that don't work. I guarantee it. Next question.
Eric Price of Leavenworth, Kansas is up next, and he says, any thoughts of taking non-broadcast office hours day, thinking EDU here, and making them available to office hours regular by some means other than YouTube when we're forced to miss?
I just need some time off every once in a while that we're not recording. So we're not going to, probably not. so I just, I have a different demeanor when I'm on YouTube versus off YouTube, and I know that people can be recording it, but just in general distribution, it's just not going to happen. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Maybe somebody on those days, on certain times, could write some notes up, or at least there is some kind of record of some of the insights and things. I don't know.
I don't even want
a formal process or a list.
I don't want a formal process or an informal process. I just want us to have every once in a while we can just have a conversation and we don't have to record it, or worry about it. It's that moment that we're going to have. Sundays are kind of like that moment. And, if people want to do it on their own, there's nothing I can do to stop them. But I just think that I just want people to be in that moment for that moment. And then we let it go, and we don't have to have everything be recorded. I think that in our society right now, it seems like we're just in this thing where we have to document everything. And so I just think that in some cases, we just want to have a conversation and not feel like it's going anywhere. And it is. I mean, people could record it, but I don't really want it. I'm not going to build any structure to support that, because I just want it to be just its thing. Go ahead, Taylor.
Alex, I actually take that as a compliment. The fact that everybody wants this recorded all the time just shows and highlights the value of the content and what we're producing here, that people are like, okay, can it be recorded? Well, if I have to miss, I don't miss this valuable information I love so much.
Right. Well, and I think that we do generate a lot of content already. So we are generating over 10 hours of recorded content every week, and then we have all this other time. And so I think that in some cases I find myself a little bit more relaxed, and I find that the show is a little bit more interesting when I don't feel like I'm being recorded. So even if I am, but I just don't feel like when it's on YouTube, I think is the part that I'm more sensitive to. Go ahead, Courtney.
And we can just call it Sidebar Sundays. So it's kind of like a legal sidebar. It's
exactly. Sidebar Sunday. I like that. All right, next question.
Ken Jones in Seattle next with what determines rendering time in OBS and what settings do I need to make this combo actually work? Some frames take 20 milliseconds, sad face.
I don't know about OBS, but I can tell you generally it's just what needs to be computationally managed to make that work. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, there's a ton of factors that you have to include in there. What kind of computer you're running, what graphics card you're running, if you're running more than one camera, if you're running graphic overlays on that, and if you're running more than one camera, is it the exact same camera? Is it a different frame rate? Is it a different this and that and the other thing? So if you really want it to work, OBS is open source. You can go into the code and do the tweaks yourself to make it work for what you use it for. But there's a lot of determining factors to really put into the play there.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, and most long GOP compression, which is OBS is using, the amount of pixels that change from one frame to the next frame really determine the rendering time. And so if you've got a lot of moving, if your camera's moving or there's a lot of stuff moving in the frame or there's a lot of detail in the frame that is changing because of noise in the camera, that can change your encoding time drastically.
Next question.
Comes from Hasmuk in Cape Town again. Supersource view, how did you do this? Can you sketch the setup or is it all going to change again? Have not watched last night's my 1 a.m. second WWDC session yet.
I can sketch a little bit of it just so you kind of understand it. It's so you have every computer. Basically, what we're doing here is last night we had a shared event where everyone's in the same panel together instead of putting them in separate breakout rooms the way we did on Monday night. So what happens though is that they're all shared, but each one of these is pinned on a different person. So the people that were regulars, so the developers and Andy and Jason are all they were all pinned, in there. So that HDMI, goes out, gets converted to SDI, and gets put into the switcher, and then it's just a Supersource. Then those are just video signals to the computer. So those are pins. What we had planned to do was have those pins, and then we were going to have a wild card, which is anybody who's speaking from the panel, but we just didn't have a larger panel, and then a panel. So the idea is that we could cut to the whole panel, we could cut to someone who's speaking from the panel, we could cut to people that are kind of the guests within the show. And so that's kind of, where we were kind of going with that process there, and where we'll probably keep on playing with it. Again, a lot of this is the big challenge that we have is just really the isolated audio at this point. Isolated video, I think that Liminal's got a pretty good handle on, but isolated audio, once we solve that, I think we're going to be able to, not have to do that. And one of the things we're going to play with is putting a reflector in our office, and what do we have access to there? And there's a bunch of things that we're looking at to make that work. Go ahead, Alex.
How are the lower thirds and temporary graphics done in that case?
Lower third, we had lower thirds because we didn't have a panel. We had the lower thirds were just the people that we knew were coming, and those were generated. I'm not sure where. I think Aaron generated them in Affinity Designer or Infinity Photo or whatever to make those work. But those are just downstream keys, that were added. The questions were a web page over black that was just luma keyed, into the system. So that was a relatively, we have a lower third feature within Mukana that we just don't use very often. But for other shows we use it a lot. For this show we don't, and so that we just turned that on and just made that available. So it was inside the operator page. You just hit out third, and you just hit it, and it just goes to a web page that displays that, as you're going through it. So it's pretty easy to be active. Without having to think too much on it. It's got a bunch of design tools. So that was designed inside of just inside the web page, because you'll notice it didn't have kind of that metallic look, because we can't do that. We can just do a line. But we have a lot of control otherwise. Next question.
Mike Beardmore out of Reading, UK says, does the panel have experience of QLab, the QLab app? And if so, how does it compare?
Yeah, a lot of us use QLab. It's really great. We've actually had them. If you go look back, I think we actually had one of the founders on the show to talk to us about it because we like it so much. QLab is great for really working in a performance and being able to queue, as you would guess, lots of things. So you can send out cues, receive cues, play out video, play out audio, all of those things, and those things can all be driven back to a Stream Deck or just external cues of something being hit. And so it's a very, very powerful play out system that I would say I highly recommend. We've got a couple copies in the office that we use for. A lot of times, what happens is we have a lot of play out, and we put those into HyperDecks because they tie into the switcher. So the stuff we know about, and then what we do is the QLab becomes kind of the wild card. Oh, we've got a bunch of things coming in, or we have a bunch of things that in quick succession that all have to be played, and we practice it over and over again until all the TD has to do or someone just hit spacebar, and it just keeps on playing out what needs to get played out for that as long as people stay in line. But it also gives us the opportunity to jump out and change the order if we need to. It's great application. Next question.
Mark Giuliani in Alexandria, Virginia says, I'm having an issue on an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO when I fade to black. I notice flickering in Zoom, but not on my program monitor. Any ideas why that is?
Yeah, go ahead, Karl.
So you may want to check your video settings in Zoom to automatically adjust light levels and make me look better, whatever that's called, that feature's called. There's those two features. Make sure they're unchecked.
Yeah, and also WebRTC is trying, there's certain things that long GOP, as Courtney was talking about earlier, the group of pictures, what happens is that you can sneak up on a long GOP. So what happens in a long GOP is you have all these frames, right? But it doesn't, the reason that we make it smaller is to not keep all the frames. So we have, in the keyframe here, we have the whole frame, and then we have another one over here that might be 2 seconds or 8 seconds later that are there. In between, we have what are called P frames and B frames that are, and I don't think that Zoom uses B frames, but P frames, which basically says I'm going to look at the one before me, and I'm only going to look at what was changed, like what was different, between this frame and the frame before it. And so I only keep that information. That works great as long as you don't change things slowly. So when a fade changes things slowly, and suddenly Zoom realizes, oh no, we're off to something else, and so then it cuts. So most likely what you're seeing there is it could either be the lighting correction, but it also can be that any kind of slow change can cause tearing or can cause a jump because it suddenly realizes that a whole lot of pixels have changed more than it expected and has to throw another keyframe in, and then it'll pop. And that's something you see often in encoding. Next question.
Johnny STS is back from Manila. On Office Hours 2.0, I noticed you were debating how and whether to send a multiview return feed to the fixed panelists. Could Control Room encode the multiview via WebRTC, which could be viewed by the panelists without having to send it back to Zoom?
We can, absolutely. The reason we don't do that is so that they don't have to think about something else. So we want to deliver them back something that they can just use rather than having yet another window that they have to open. If anything, right now, the problem is they have to open too many things. So that's something that we'll continue to work on, making it easier for them. Eventually, we want the panelists to have their own little view of the system that is like a web view that they get to see and makes it easier for them to interact. Next question.
Darnell Gadberry in Orange County, California says, are Alex, Karl, and Ken all using Blackmagic cameras?
I am. You're using Ursa, right, Ken? And then Karl is using, you're using the Canon. So we'll go around the horn really fast. So just say the one word and just list off your camera so people can make a comparison. Jeffrey.
Sony AX7 FDR AX700.
Jesse.
Sony RX100.
Karl.
Canon 5 DSR.
Mark.
Canon 5.
Ken.
Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro.
Bill.
Blackmagic 6K.
Taylor. I can't hear you, Taylor.
Logitech C920.
Courtney.
Cozy with the HDMI out.
Richard.
Canon C100.
Jason.
Blackmagic 6K.
Jim.
Sony A6400.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jim Hankins. Go ahead. Say it again, Jim.
Yeah, Sony A6400 for a couple more days until I switch to the Blackmagic 6K.
Go ahead, George.
Pocket camera 4K.
Beiju.
Sony A6300.
Brian.
Blackmagic Studio HD.
Ken. Oh, can't hear you, Ken. Ken, I can't hear you.
The other Ken, yeah.
Ken Jones. Sorry.
Brio.
Oh, great. Tim, home.
Huddlecam HD, but it's a mobile setup for travel.
Good. Sky.
Brio 4K Pro webcam.
Yep. Go ahead, Alex.
Logitech Brio 4K.
And Mike.
Lumix G7.
So wide variety of those, but you can kind of get a sense of what those are, and you can always keep on looking at them and deciding what you like and what you don't like, and what's good enough for what you're doing. Next question.
Talak Lopez Waterman here in the panel. Often when you have many options about a project, like the new direction of office hours, what methodology do you use to stay the course of what you're trying to do?
Go ahead, Jason.
Don't change a whole lot all at once, especially if you have a beautiful thing and you don't quite know why.
Yeah, you always have two tugs that you have to kind of deal with. One tug is you have to keep moving forward, and you have to keep on making it better and growing, or it'll get stale. The second tug is that you can't, that you if you change too much, you'll screw it up. So again, that's one of the reasons that we pushed really hard over the last 2 weeks. We're going to slow down a little bit again. We're not changing our first hour in structure very much, other than making the resolution higher. And we're not changing all, so there's little bits and pieces that we're improving. But it's also why we didn't change for a long time, until we kind of let a lot of the concrete dry, in what we're doing. So that people, like if we had done this last summer, people would just stop coming, because they didn't have that relationship. They didn't understand what we were trying to do, and we didn't have it to where it is now. So I think that, and then inside of that, I think you have to be, in Zen, we would say supple, where you are going to, move with what's there, and keep on, you want to keep going a direction, but you don't want to necessarily take a hard path. So a lot of it is we'll turn things on and go, oh, well, let's adjust that. Let's push this way. So you're going to keep on, kind of swimming through that, to make it work. But again, to Jason's point, without changing too much all at one time. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, in the arts, in our practice, you often have many different competing ideas about a project, about a theatre show, about anything. And normally how we arbitrate those is, what is the original intention of the show? Take it back to what the original intention is, and what is the choice that's going to amplify that, support that, and bring it forward.
Right. And there's been a lot of things that, to prepare for this, there's been a lot of things that we've been carefully doing over a long period of time. So one of the things is that we move slower, and sometimes you're not, so the pre-show and the post-show were put in months ago to prepare for this, to make sure that people still had a place that they could just talk, and so the second hour started to get tightened up, and a year ago, and so a lot of this stuff has been moving very, very slowly, and I'm looking out at what things I think are going to be problematic, and then adding things that I think are going to offset the things that need to get done, in those pieces, but setting them up months in advance to make that work, as opposed to weeks in advance. And again, part of it was that, figuring out that system and how we're going to do a lot of that stuff. Matt in the kitchen came by at the right time for me to say, okay, well, this will help me, figure a bunch of bits and pieces out of what I want to do and not do. So Sky was willing. Sky was kind enough to give us a little something that I could fiddle with and think out some of the bits and pieces as well. So, and we'll keep on thinking it out, and we'll keep on getting your feedback and continue to play with it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Within 090's marketing, you mentioned being on net with LTN and the Switch. What do those companies do? Is it basically a massive router to route video content from one company to another?
They're essentially, they work slightly differently. The Switch works on a private network. I mean, it basically buys bandwidth from AT&T and Verizon and a couple others to do the backbone. So the Switch is a kind of a more managed network. LTN is really designed to work over the public internet more effectively. And so what they do is they do relatively high quality video backhauls up to 4K, back between things at a very low latency. The Switch is generally under 80 milliseconds, and LTN is about 150, which is still faster than Zoom, but still a little slower than the Switch. In my opinion, Switch is higher quality, but LTN is less expensive. So and it's used for news all the time, and we've had a long relationship with both companies for the last decade. Go ahead, Beju.
So a quick question on this. So how do you actually feed video in and out of the Switch or LTN? Do you have specific encoders for that with this supply, or is it your own stuff, hardware?
No, it's their own. So they bring in hardware that's basically part of it. The Switch will bring in, they have different. It depends on what you're doing. So LTN will bring in an encoder, and then that is registered. And then you can also, with the Switch, they'll bring in their own encoders that you interface with. What's cool about the Switch, for instance, is we've done more work with the Switch than LTN, is that you can schedule it. Like I'm going to schedule the NBC at a certain, my out into their in, and you can do that all on a web page. And then it's just, when it turns on, if they accept it, it just turns on, and they've got the signal, and that signal is super low latency and super high quality. And you can even decide with the Switch, I want J2K, which might be 250 megs a second, or I can do uncompressed. So you can literally send uncompressed over, through the Switch network at $720 an hour. So it's not the cheapest. $360 an hour is I think the going rate for the Switch at J2K. But you can also, because it's a straight video signal, you can do ASI and stack up 8 signals onto it if you want to. You can the Switch, if the Switch comes and drops you a Nimbra, you can also get video and bandwidth. So you can have a gig. Until a lot of facilities got smart, they'd charge you $10,000 a day for their internet. And we would put the Switch in, and then we would drop a Nimbra. We'd have a 1 gig connection out of their hotel or their conference center, and it took them a couple of years before they realized that we didn't need their bandwidth anymore. And so then now they've gotten smart, and they charge for it, even if we're doing the Switch. Next question.
Johnny SDS in Manila is back again there is more a comment than a question. Just wanted to report back on my purchase of an XP Pen Artist 13.3-inch tablet. Has been working great as an Alex-like telestrator.
It should. I had so much bad experiences with non-Wacom solutions that I stopped doing it, but I've looked at the XP Pen because it actually looks like it's a pretty good solution. So I'm glad to hear back that it's working well. For what we're using it for, it should work fine. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when you're interfacing external audio devices to a DAW or a digital mixer, what's the most effective way to measure round-trip latency?
Go ahead, Karl.
So if you want to absolutely measure what the latency is, simply have an output coming to actually have that loop coming out, so whatever that round loop is, and then have a direct loop in before it even goes into the mixer. So maybe from a preamp, you can divide and go into a recorder, take that recording, left, right, check, put it into a DAW and actually measure it, to the millisecond. You can figure that out if you want to.
Yep, absolutely. And I've done ones where we just send a tone. We do a little EQ or a shift on it in the mixer, so it goes in and out, and you hear bip boop, and you hear this little and it just sounds a little different, and you can hear what that. And oftentimes though, it's very, very low, so it's like it's in audio you hear almost no latency in most of these systems, especially if you're using something like Dante. Go ahead, Ken. Ken, did you hear? Oh no. Okay. Next question.
Samuel Nordvik in Norway says, has anyone on the panel used Video Ninja / OBS Ninja for live video conferencing, and is it reliable?
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
It's WebRTC technology at its core, and Leo Laporte and even me have discovered when you're behind a complex network, it tends not to work well. If you know networking really well, and in certain circumstances you'll get great results out of it, but there's many other circumstances where you won't get great results out of it. So it just all depends on your environment and how and where you want to use it. And it also, bandwidth is important too, because your incoming and outgoing bandwidth matters when it comes to WebRTC.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I would say it depends on your tolerance for failure. If you don't have any, don't use either.
If you're asking for reliability, it's not as reliable as something like Zoom, because Zoom has got some special sauce sitting on basically on top of WebRTC to make it kind of transport, and they've got an app instead of a browser, which gives them a bunch of advantages as well. But it gives you more control. One thing that we have found is that we use it for telestration, teleprompting. So when teleprompting over the internet, Zoom does not handle the words very well, so it will lag. It's just the way it's compressing it. And OBS Ninja, we found, doesn't look as nice as Zoom. Like, it's a little rougher in the way it compresses it, but the quality of the video, the quality of the playback is better. Specifically with text. so we recently just shifted I think we've kind of moved past having a teleprompt operator in even now that we can do it, we don't bother, because we can just have a teleprompt operator come in from anywhere in the world to do that. But the problem we had was a little bit of lag, and we solved that using OBS Ninja. We didn't solve it, to be honest with you. Our teleprompt operator uses it all the time, and so she solved it that way. Next question.
Hazmak Gajar from Cape Town, our friend on the show, says, cooking show with each camera attending the Zoom meeting. 3 cameras, 3 computers. Each computer joins the meeting. HDMI splitter from each camera to the computer and to the ATEM. How to turn each camera and computer into a meeting participant, and the camera and the ATEM. It's pretty complex.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would probably use something like the Matrix that I've bought. That's what I'm going to test it for, to kind of go out to the ATEM and then go into other things to do that. But otherwise, it's just setting up different accounts that can join. Go ahead, Jason.
This may be completely off, but this is a classic SDI switcher thing, where if you take a bidirectional, you get the mix minus, and it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I haven't tried enough of the mix minus with the ATEM, but I think that this is just the 3 different cameras that are in there. So I think that how do each run each camera? I mean, I would do this with Mac Minis. For me, I would stack up Mac Minis with Apple Remote Desktop so that I could just jump into each one so that I could join them. You don't have to do anything once their camera's going into the system. And then you'd be able to do it. I'm assuming that you're doing that so that people can choose what they're watching, in the process, and you can still cut your own show. You can get individual splitters, but again, Monoprice makes a 8x8 matrix that just means you can put them in and split them out, to where they need to go. And that's kind of where I'm going with a lot of those things to make that work. That way I can send it to 2 different places. Remember, the Mac Mini, though, the advantage of that is you can send 2 signals out at the same time. So you don't need it for that. You need it for other things, but you can send the Mac Mini of HDMI, and then you have USB-C or Thunderbolt or whatever to HDMI. So you can have 2 mirrored displays come out of that without any real trouble. Go ahead, Beju.
One question about this. If you're using a splitter, does the camera control information from the Blackmagic camera and the ATEM transfer over, or is that get stripped?
I haven't tested that yet, and I'm not using it for that, so I'm still running my camera straight in, but I haven't tested whether it can do it. I think it can, because it's got the Monoprice one is supposed to carry all the information back and forth, but I haven't tested it yet, and I will know probably by middle of next week. Next question
comes from Samuel Nordvik in Norway. Is there any way to live stream true 25 progressive, 50 progressive to YouTube?
Karl?
Unfortunately not. So YouTube, this is directly from YouTube, so the RTVM streaming, so it's 30 and 60 only. So as someone who lives in a 50 hertz world, you'll just have to use a camera that can do 30 hertz, so 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second.
So one thing to test, and I was told this and I haven't had time to test it, is that if you stream 25 frames per second, that the VOD after processing will be 25 frames a second. So the live version will be up converted to 30 for the live transport, but the VOD itself will end up being 25 frames a second. And it may be something you want to test. I was told that by someone who felt very certain of it. I have not had time to test it. And the way you would test it is you stream something out at 25, let it sit for a day, and then go into your YouTube and download it, and then open it up in QuickTime or whatever and get info and just see what happens there. Go ahead, Jason.
There's always Vimeo.
To stream it, yeah. I don't know. Does Vimeo do multiple stream rates?
I think so, if you pay them.
I don't know for sure. Almost every streaming platform, unless you're building your own HLS, almost all of them go to 30. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, Vimeo was a bit weird. You can send it 50 frames per second, but often in the transcoding will do that down to 25 frames per second. It's very odd.
Yeah. Next question.
Mike Burns here in the panel from Spokane, Washington. Curious to know if the Mukana links have expiration dates, and if so, why?
I don't think they do.
Alex, I don't know, man. I've had many times where I've clicked on them and it just doesn't. They don't load. It's like a server errors or something. And I was just curious.
There's no. Yeah, we. If it happened just this week, we split the server that may have caused some issues that we're working through, just to make sure that we weren't sure what the demand would be this week. So we put. Mukana was on a smaller server and then got put on S3, and there may be some stuff that we're kind of ironing out at the moment. Go ahead, Jason.
My guess is this has to do with the cookie handling policy in your web browser. You update your web browser, Firefox cranks down a screw, or Chrome does some sort of something. Your cookie expires and you have to start over.
Yeah. Next question.
Josh Kaufman's up next with virtual machine versus sandboxing for screen scraping multiple Zoom instances on Windows. Sandboxy Plus has been far better for latency, screen quality, and resource footprint, but I keep hearing about virtual machines for this use. Might it be my VM client?
Silence. I don't know if anybody here has done that. This is a Guy Cochran question. Go ahead, Jason.
My guess is it has to do with the resource constraints of the VM. I can't imagine what else it could be.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with, have you had to deal with infrastructure or governmental challenges when working in less developed countries, and how have you overcome them?
Yes. I know. I mean, it just depends on, and I wouldn't say that we've had those resource issues with less developed countries. We've had those issues in all countries. So, I mean, but it's hard to define exactly what that means. There's, a lot of what you do is you, whether it's less developed or more developed or just developed countries, you end up with all kinds of infrastructure problems with bandwidth, with moving large files. And what you do is you just get really good at caching, so where is that going to go and what can I do over the amount of time that I have? But I can't say that my experience has been up or down. I've been in countries where I should not have any bandwidth, where I have a lot. And I'm in countries that I should have a lot of bandwidth and I don't. So it's, there's not really any, rhyme or reason to that problem. But the key is just knowing what it is and what you can count on and then building around it rather than trying to force your way through it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wants to talk about the ins and outs of handling FCC licensing for RF allocations at an event.
I don't know if Taylor wants to jump into that, but yeah, go ahead.
It depends on the distance and the range you want to cover, because based on your distance and range will base on the output. The FCC also calculates it based off of sea level. So if you're at an event that's already above sea level, and then based on your distance and that, it's a big calculated a math problem, to say the least. If I can find a link real quick, I'll put it in Mukana.
The funny thing is, when you talk about sea level in Pittsburgh, the Pitt College station is 10 watts. Like it just has no power, but it sits on top of this giant building, the Cathedral of Learning, which is, I don't know, 60 stories high or something.
It's a perfectly placed refrigerator of an antenna.
Yeah, and then they put this antenna up on top of it. It goes a long way. Like I was like, when I used to work with them, I was always like, how do you hear this from so far away with 10 watts? And then I saw where it was, and their studios are in that building right near the top. And right. Height makes a big difference in how far it's going to, line of sight for FM. If you're talking about RF, there's obviously unlicensed signals, which you're competing with a lot of other folks, and there's licensed signals. That's when you really have to start, paying attention to where you're at. And the part of the licensing is keeping it separate so that you're working with someone who, has it licensed for that area and make it work. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, as someone who worked in AM radio in the early days too, AM bounces off the stratosphere, so we'd get the weirdest pings back from Latvia and places like that as our signal just kept bouncing off the ionosphere and getting to different people. It was fun.
Go ahead, Taylor.
One of the biggest things the FCC is big on is interference. I know when I put up my low power FM station, when I put the antenna up and I put it up on the tower, anybody in surrounding residence or office buildings right below that tower, I had to ensure they could listen to any radio station they wanted to without interference. If it was like that, then I had to adjust it.
When I there's a relay antenna on Lookout Mountain over Denver, Colorado, and there's a wedding location there that they have, or event location that do a lot of weddings. And I used to do a wedding there probably once a month when I was a kid, when I was younger, 30 years ago, and I could pick up all the radio stations without a radio. so it was depending on, it was we were so close to it. I was like, this has got to be bad for the people who work here regularly, because it just didn't, literally I had to cover my entire kit with tinfoil. Otherwise, it would just blow the radio stations through my system. Go ahead, Courtney.
At most events, you'll find someone is placed in charge of frequency coordination for organizing all the wireless transmitters in that site. And they have a piece of software that calculates intermodulation distortion, and will put you on channels, or tell you what channels are available without knocking other channels off, and that is a problem.
Yeah, and that's not an FCC thing as much as a frequency coordinator. It is important to know, if you're working in a larger event, you want to find out who the frequency coordinator is, because they'll shut you down real quickly. If they don't know who you are, they can see you, and they can find you, and they'll walk up and ask you to turn off all your gear. And once you're in the show, you think that you want to ask for, it's better to, as often you say, it's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. In the area of frequency coordination, it's better to ask for permission, because once you're in it and they turn you off, they're just not going to let you turn it back on, and so there's not going to be anywhere to go. And so getting ahead of that is really important. Next question.
Mike Burns here in the panel from Spokane. I want to buy a Lazulite type background. However, I need it to be super portable, maybe mounted on wheels, wardrobe rack type rig, perhaps. Any suggestions?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Some of these pop-ups now have a little rig with a single pole in the back with a clip on the top. They work okay. If you're in a noisy air conditioning thing, or there's a lot of wind, it'll twist around a little bit. That's probably the simplest, easiest, most portable background rig I've seen.
Lazulite, I don't know if it's Lazulite that makes it, but there is a magnet that will go out that will just snap. The Lazulite will just snap to it. And so you can pop it up and it just pop, and you don't even have to clamp it on. It'll just pop on, because it's using the metal ring that's in the Lazulite to just snap to it. And then it's just a pole with that little thing hanging out, and you just pop it up, and it's literally, once you get over the folding the 6x7 up, it's relatively quick, and you just have to make sure that your kids aren't around while you're doing it, because there's a lot of swearing and frick. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, that's what I'm using right now, and I love it. The magnet is absolutely worth the ridiculous $130 that it costs, because it puts the whole thing on a C-stand, and it just doesn't move.
Yep. Next question.
Ken Richards, Richer, looks like, of Bryan, Ohio, says, I enjoy tuning into office hours from time to time. All of your commitment to the show is simply amazing. How do you all find time to do this every day? Is your day longer than 24 hours?
Go ahead, Jason.
You'll always have the time, motivation, and energy to do what matters to you.
Go ahead, Karl.
Well, I live in the future, so it makes it easier for me.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've got a time machine back here, so that's how I could do 24 hours.
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
Office hours is right after I get off work. So I just sign off at work and sign into office hours.
2 words, warp core. so anyway, I think that the thing that I look at is that it's how much time it saves me. So, the office hours saves me a lot of time in many areas, because I'm able to solve problems faster, because of what I've learned from everybody here. I'm able to bring up questions as needed here to figure things out. And I'm able to find people to help me with things. So, we're, constantly in little bits of projects. Oh, I need someone to go handle something over here. I need someone to, build this 3D model. I need someone to, produce, we have a lot of people, well, not a lot at any given time, but a handful of people working for us all the time that I met through office hours, that I don't have to, that time that it took to find someone that I actually have some relationship with, that I can get things done, saves me more time than anything I was that I'm spending into the system. So there's all those things stacked up, gives us more time than takes it away. Next question.
Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. says, how do you turn off control sound notifications in Discord?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Mute the tab. Right-click, mute tab.
There you go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, what strategies have you found helpful to study for industry certification exams like the Cisco CCNA?
And by the way, if we're waiting to ask questions, this is a good time, because otherwise we're going to have a shorter show than normal. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so it's been over 20 years since I've done the Cisco ones, but as I recall, those were very terminology focused. So absence experience in learning the terminology, a good strategy would be to find a study buddy and do the flashcard method to get through all the terminology. But experience is your best teacher for pretty much any of the those kinds of certifications.
And go ahead, Jason.
If you like the office hours format, it's been a while since I've tuned in, but IT Pro TV, those guys are really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
Mike Burns is back from Spokane in the panel. A few months ago, I bought a few Nanlite LumaPads 25s. Soon after I purchased them, they rolled out the Bluetooth-controlled models. Is it worth an upgrade? My mobility is very challenged.
I haven't used the ones that have that are Bluetooth controlled, so I don't have a strong opinion about it yet. Go ahead, Mike. Are you gonna?
Yeah, my issue is I have MS, so getting to these lights sometimes, because the way I have them mounted is really hard. So it would be very convenient just to be able to remotely kind of dial them in, because right now I know my coloring's a little off, but I'll get it figured out.
What I will say is that I love LumaPads. We buy hundreds and hundreds of Nanlights at this point. But I will say that I feel that their software, I haven't needed their software control that much, and I feel that Aperture has done a better job at their software control than Nanlite. I think Nanlite's working on it, but I don't think that, and again, we haven't needed that, so it hasn't been a acute problem for us, and the Nanlites are a little less expensive for for the same output that we need. And we buy so many, so that little number adds up to thousands and thousands of dollars for us. And so, and we've been really happy with them, durability and usability. But I will say that I don't feel like their software control lives up to the same level that Aperture, provides with their lights. Next question
is from Mike again from Spokane. He says, have you ever considered doing a used equipment exchange or sale in Discord? I've got some gear I'd like to sell.
It's a popular question. It's a popular question, and we don't do it mostly because there's no better way to ruin your relationship, ruin your community, is to have people buying and selling among each other, because it's not done by purpose. It's not like anyone's taking advantage of anyone else. It's just that you have two different levels of expectation. The person selling it has an expectation of what they were selling. The person buying it has an expectation of what they were buying. And those don't always line up, and then people are upset. And so the reason that we don't put it into our forum is specifically to avoid that problem. And I'd rather people just put it on eBay and tell people. You can tell people about that. You put it on eBay, but I'd rather not have something that we're building that inner relationship between our community, because I feel like it's a tricky situation, and that I think that could create. What happens is two people don't get along, like something didn't happen right with the sale, and then they're always picking at each other in Discord, and then before you know it, it becomes like they have two little groups, and there's a whole bunch of things that all happen, and it all comes from like one sale that went bad, and not that it's ever happened. We used to have one in Pixelcore. We used to have a buy and sell, and there were so many problems with it, and it would always be, when you looked at it from the outside, you're always like, well, that was just a misunderstanding, but it wasn't like someone was trying to take advantage of anyone else, but the misunderstanding, it would unwrap, and then it would turn into these little storms that would sweep through our system, and that's why we don't have it. Go ahead, Bill.
And I think that has gotten more complex as time has gone by, because, for example, my Apollo Solo worked great when I first got it. Then there was an update to the system. It didn't work as well. I could have gotten really upset and said everything's broken, but a software update refreshed everything and it's now working fine. So the question is, was it ever a bad piece of equipment or not? My perceptions of the same piece of gear have changed over its evolution. And so I can see somebody saying, I can't use this. I want to get rid of it cheap. Somebody else can get it and go, it works perfectly. I figured out how to use it.
More importantly, the other way around is the one I worry about.
Both ways.
So anyway, that's why we don't know. That's why we don't do it, and probably won't anytime soon. Next question.
Alton Christensen in Brooklyn says, we discussed a lot about buttoned-up presentations, Apple and so forth, and then there was the Tesla Model S Plaid launch train wreck last night. Is Elon Musk exempt from the presentation disaster syndrome?
Yeah, so I watched this event. Elon's come
What
out.
happened? For those of us who didn't see it, because I was busy doing some other show, I was tired.
They actually tried to do a live camera from the car doing 0 to 60 in sub 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
The signal broke up, but they had multiple cameras. They had a drone shot. So that wasn't... The event itself was okay. The switching is always ordinary. It's a outdoor event, so it's not so bad. It's more Elon. So Elon has come out and said he's on this, the Asperger spectrum. So he's just not the most focused person when it comes to doing a presentation that we're used to with Apple and Frame.io. That was pretty cool. But with Elon, he's just live, and he actually responds to the front row of the audience. And the front row of the audience asked for a feature to be added to the car, and he laughed and he said, okay, I'll add it. So his actual interaction is actually very natural, but his presentation is not what we're used to from other Fortune 500 companies.
I think that one of the things that when it's working, when they're not trying to do anything exciting, having engineers and Musk on stage connects them with the audience in a way that's more effective than all the shininess. When you go on all the shininess, you got to get it right all the time, because you're not really building that relationship. You're just building a presentation. And so I think the standards are much higher for people, but because he interacts with people so directly, and because, like, I know that I don't remember what it was, but they were on stage in Vegas and it was outside and it looked horrible. And I was like, but it was great. It was like you were just getting the owner of the company and some engineer talking to you about stuff. And I felt that was more compelling than most of the other things that I've seen, and I think that, that conversational, like, I'm just going to take your questions and answer them, is what we do here every day. And we find that, I think that we have found that we're going to add quality, to it, as far as visual quality over the next 2 months. But the core of it is great conversation and a relatively candid conversation. And so I think that he's willing to do that in ways that corporations aren't willing to do. And so I think that's why he gets a pass, is because he's built up this online relationship, with folks. I think that if Steve Jobs did more of that, he would have, he was another person that could answer that. His answers would be hard for people to hear probably a lot of times in real time, but probably why they didn't do that with Steve. so anyway, I think that there's a lot of stories about whether Steve Jobs was hard or soft, but he was very rarely wrong. It's just that he delivered it, without any padding, and that was the hard part that people had. Go ahead, Jason.
The thing about Elon Musk is he's incapable of being disingenuous. So you're never going to get what you expect, but you're always going to get something that kind of surprises and delights the audience.
But I think that when you build that kind of real relationship with your audience, you can get away with a lot, because they don't have an expectation that it's going to be a shiny show. When you build a shiny show, it better be a shiny show. Go ahead, Mike.
So what I'm hearing is producing a good live event is actually harder than sending someone to the moon?
No, I wouldn't say that. Here's the thing: is that you can either be, I can't remember the exact quote, but from Harvey, one of my favorite movies, from Jimmy Stewart movie from a long time ago. He's got a big we don't know if it's imaginary, but a rabbit called a puka. And one of the things he said that he learned, this is from the 40s or 50s or something like that, but he goes, I think it was my father or my mother told me, you can be oh so clever or oh so sweet. I found it easier to be sweet. And so the moral of that is that when you're authentic and when you're having a conversation and when you're building a relationship, you don't have to be as clever. And so, when live events have to be really shiny, you have to get it all just right. When you are more conversational and connected in a true way, you have a lot more room for error. In that area. And the same thing that we've talked about with the cooking, that a lot of us preferred, we could have a really refined show, but a lot of us just preferred hanging out on Zoom and cooking together and just kind of working through it. Go ahead, Sky, and then Courtney.
Well, Saturday Night Live is notorious for being everything's on the cue card because it's a timed show. Consequently, when Elon Musk was on the Saturday Night Live, he was not on there because he's a good performer. He was on there because he was Elon Musk. And he was reading from a cue card. So there's again the context of he's Elon Musk, so that's how he got that shot on that spot.
But he gets to be Elon Musk because of what he's done, but also how he is with people, and the fact that people feel connected to him. Go ahead, Courtney and Karl, real quick. We're gonna.
Elon is very unfiltered in that show that Alex was talking about, was the battery show. He had a co-host who was one of the engineers that could answer all the engineering questions in a coherent, straight line fashion, whereas Elon bounces around constantly. So it
was fun. It was good. I thought it was one of the best keynotes ever. It was just really fun to watch. I didn't need it to be shiny. It was great to just see him up there. Go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, just to continue what Courtney was saying about Battery Day, he does have a co-host, and it is highly rehearsed by the co-host. And Elon leans on the co-host, and Battery Day is actually a recruiting day. He's actually recruiting engineers and scientists. So he's much more switched on, much more professional on those Battery Days. This was a celebration of him releasing the fastest car in the world. So it's a bit different. He's just more giddy when he's doing these kind of things that he did last night.
Next question.
Doug Johnson, Orem, Utah. Sometimes in Zoom, full screen video will play with frames way out of order, resulting in a max headroom-like experience. Am I the only one seeing this, or is there a known fix?
Oftentimes that is a mesh network, a wireless connection over a mesh network somewhere is causing the frame ordering problem. That's been the when we've seen that for a decade. Not just with Zoom, it's just that the mesh network is handing those frames back and out of order, and it can be. But that's where we found it to be the most problematic. Next question.
Matt Cool, Montreal, Quebec. I've been asked about doing an indoor drone show for an upcoming event. Anyone know a company that does that?
Go ahead, Jason.
Intel, and be very, very careful.
Yeah, there's a handful of companies that actually focus on it, not just Intel, but they focus on that service. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Beju.
Yeah, drone rule. Well, FAA may not have jurisdiction if it's indoors, but the rules and regulations of flying over people that are gathered together are very strict and very carefully monitored by the FAA. They may get away with it, but your insurance company probably wouldn't cover it.
Matt's in Canada, but it's still they've got their own set of rules. Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, one thing, as far as I'm aware, Intel produces the shows themselves. They don't let you actually buy the gear or the system to set up yourself. There are, I think, 2 or 3 companies which do indoor. I'll see if I can find the links. I was researching them last year, so I might be able to find them.
Yeah, there's a Chinese firm that actually does do them.
Yeah, the thing is that indoor ones, there are 2 or 3 companies which do the indoor ones, which are specifically really tiny ones designed for safety to run them around performance. So they are a bit more specialist, and they have very, very accurate management indoors.
And I guess I don't know. Oh, I see. It's an indoor drone. Yeah, those are. China has really taken the lead in those areas. I mean, they do some incredible drone, formations. It's just unbelievable. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, and one more thing. Indoor, they're going to be extremely gridded, so it's not really going to be the same kind of a spectacle.
Next question.
Philip Oler in Katona, New York says, best way of using 3 pile mics into an ATEM Extreme.
Go ahead, Karl.
If you have to go into the ATEM Extreme, so that's not if you're not going to go through any other, you may want to just use an analog mixer, but you'll need an analog mixer, so same one as Jason's holding as well. But you want an analog mixer that has RCA out. So it's important that you actually have the consumer output, because that's or unbalanced output, because that's what the ATEM is expecting, unbalanced output. Don't try and put balanced output into an ATEM Mini via the the 1/8" jack. It just doesn't play nice.
Next question.
Brian Anderson, Silver Spring, Maryland. Often on the panel, I picked up an LG CX yesterday. Wow. So I'm rewiring the home theater. Do you suggest using AVR to connect all devices and send one HDMI to the TV, or connect devices to the TV and just send sound to the AVR? Also ARC or not ARC?
Go ahead, Karl.
Okay, so if your receiver is close to the TV, use ARC out of the television back, and then you can do inputs. If you need multiple, you can actually do both. So you can use one of your inputs as a receiver. If you've got, let's say you have 4 inputs on the TV, one of them is going to be ARC, so you've got 3 left over, and you've got 7 things you want to go in. So you're going to use a combination of both. If you're doing a long cable run from your receiver to the television, then simply just run everything into the ARC, and then one cable from the receiver to the television.
Go ahead, Jason.
The only thing that I would add to that is, if for any reason you're going to have a PlayStation 5 at any point, use EARC, or you are never going to get high frame rate.
Do you want to explain what ARC is for the viewers?
Oh, yeah. Audio return channel. It's essentially an aux channel that allows the audio to return back through the source and be played out of another HDMI device.
Go ahead, Brian.
Just expensive friends, thank you.
And are you getting a new AVR? Or do you have an AVR that you're already using with the CX?
I have a Denon, and it's nice. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's great. Next question.
I'm going to probably need help with this one. Jonas Dattel of Raylingan said, Alex, are you coming in the same way to the YouTube stream than test rest? That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Anybody can decode that for me?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I can say that I'm coming in with everybody else. So I think that might be what the question is that we're still in the same shared environment. I'm not in a separate environment as we go in. If that's where the question is pointed to, yeah, I'm definitely right now we're just doing a screen scrape of the participant view. So Taylor is cutting the show, and we're just a participant, but we're getting a higher resolution because of that. But yeah, there's no separation. Next question.
Josh Kaufman says, I'm thinking about using a projector to display a background screen on camera. What tech and minimum specs should I be looking at for brightness and keystoning and so forth?
Go ahead, Bill.
The key here is to be able to control your camera in terms of iris and control the lighting that's falling on everything properly, because it's going to be difficult depending on the projector and how many lumens it puts out and whether you could dim it to get that ratio between the key lighting on the person and the screen behind them correct. So you want as much control over all those aspects as you can possibly get to try to do that. It is possible to do, but it's kind of a little tricky.
Go ahead, Karl.
So front projection is tricky, one, because your projector is going to vignette, so you don't see it with the naked eye, but a camera will see the center will be brighter than the corners. Yeah. You're going to get more array if you're going to use an LCD projector, so you have to put the projector a little bit out of focus to prevent more array. There are some catches to doing front projection, and this has been done for a long time.
Go ahead, Jason.
The only thing I would add to that is the most overlooked thing, I think, is the distance from the foreground to the screen that you're projecting on. Mm-hmm. That will also really get you.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and the brightness totally depends on the size of the screen and the throw from the projector. Another thing too, so you usually want 2,000 to 4,000 lumens at least if you want it to show up within a decent f-stop of the camera. The other thing to consider is almost all projectors are in the 6,000 to 9,000 Kelvin range for illumination. So that means they're going to be very blue unless you color correct them. So you're going to have to either send it through a color correction filter or light with that same Kelvin temperature lights for anything that you can have in the foreground included in the frame.
Yeah, one of the things, the real challenge has already been laid out. Distance to the screen to get rid of the vignetting, usually, I mean, from the shows that we've worked on, is 40 feet. Like, it's not, like, that's not like you can put it like 5 feet out and not have that vignette. You'll have the vignette, anything under, and these are Barco. like these aren't like home projection units. You're going to have a strong vignette that goes behind it. So I think that's one thing to kind of consider. Also, a lot of times when we're working on those, for those kinds of things, we have 2 to 4 projectors all stacked up on top of each other. And many of those, I mean, the total cume against the screen for an actual presentation is probably 30 to 40,000 lumens, to make that actually, work for what we're doing. So it's a lot of light that you need, and really far back to kind of even it all out. Unless you were super serious about it, I wouldn't bother. It's way better to put an 80-inch screen behind you if you're doing it small. If you're doing it big and you need to have that, then think through that. It is better. I still think projection is generally better than LED, unless you have the money to get an LED under 1 mil. 1 mil or smaller LED pitch you can get away with if you have usually if the speaker is more than 8 feet from the screen. Next question.
Jesse Mills, San Francisco Bay Area. Has anybody used the QNAP or Sonnet 5GE USB-C adapter successfully, receiving the full 5G performance?
I don't think anybody's used them yet. I have seen a handful of people posting things that are 5G tests that have been pretty good. We might have room for another question or two if folks are we're running a little low, but otherwise we can all go about our business as well. All right, next question.
Brian Schwartz, the last one in the queue at the moment from Baltimore, Maryland, says, for listing metadata of images in photos, what app would list resolution data, including file size and pixel information? Need for thumbnail printed listing of all files in an album.
Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, I use Preview for this, but Photomechanic will do it. Lightroom will do it. Basically, any metadata reader will absolutely just turn out what you need.
Go ahead, Karl.
There's a little app called EXIF View. So EXIF is the sidecar file. So EXIF View, it's actually really cool as well.
And Bill?
Media Info, same thing. Just drop a picture on it. It'll tell you everything about the picture.
That's great. Somehow we've run to the end of the internet early. We had a lot of Q&A in the last week. So we're running low. Go ahead, Alex.
I got another 27 WWDC questions if you like.
We were amazed. Like 2 in the morning for you.
Yeah. You were just cranking them out. Yeah, that's good. Looks like we got another question that fished its way in. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Shane Foley in Ashland, Oregon popped in late with, what hardware does one need to cut this show? Is the Stream Deck central to the setup? Companion, Zoom OSC?
Go ahead, Jason.
Not to be glib, but most of the time, a mouse.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're cutting the whole show on Zoom. So it's just being screen scraped to get the higher resolution and get rid of the Zoom logo. But as when we actually cut it, you can use a variety of different switchers to cut that. We're using a Constellation, and as we get bigger, we're going to be able to use all those inputs that we want to kind of file through there. So, but you don't need to use a Constellation. We need those inputs eventually because we want to pull the whole panel into it. So when we get into that, we need to be able to pull up to 30 inputs into the system, and so that's part of what we're kind of working through, to make that happen. But a mouse, as Jason said, is what we're doing right now. Next question.
Peter Rosado in late from Las Vegas. Pivot to ATV. Any thoughts on the new season of Tiny World?
There's a new season of Tiny World? Oh, my gosh.
Wait, when?
I know. How did I miss that? I have to admit, I've watched almost no the Apple TV stuff has not jumped out at me at all. So I have almost no. I'm waiting for Foundation. I'm waiting to see how Foundation turns out. And then the other things that I've watched, the wildlife at night thing, I don't think really turned over for me. But the Tiny World, I think, is one of the best nature shows ever made. I know that a lot of it's fake. Like I know that they've built their CG bees and CG this and CG that, but it's so much fun to watch. Go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, so there was a series, I think back in the 80s, called Microcosm by David Attenborough. Yeah. So this is a very similar series. So I feel this is the evolution of that, using CG to help out. But Microcosm was done on the soundstage for some of it. They would set up if you think of it like an ant farm, and they'll time lapse it, but not just an ant farm, they'll do many things. But yeah, Microcosm was I think the foundation series for Tiny World.
And the company that does it, I can't think of the name of it right now, Plimsoll. What they're known for is nature nature videos. They have a very tight relationship with National Geographic, and they had been working on some of this stuff for a decade. For the first season, the second season, I don't know, but they had really had a lot of work. But Plimsoll has been the one that does a lot of the live stuff and a lot of the production for National Geographic. So they have a very strong. It's not like just some new folks that just got into doing nature photography. These folks have been doing it for 20 or 30 years. Go ahead, Brian, and then Sky. And by the way, I think that what happened was no one's ever given them that kind of budget. like I think that they've always been working at Nat Geo budgets, not Apple budgets, and so I think Apple was like, what would you do if we gave you all the money?
Let's just render the inside of the acorn. Why not?
Like, why don't we do that? And they were like, oh yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Brian, and then Sky.
Just need to say, first two things we watched on the new LG was Mandalorian, an episode, and Tiny World, and now we have to watch all of it again because it's just so different.
So there's a new season of Tiny World?
No, it was the old one that we watched.
Okay, yeah, okay. Sky?
Well, the thing I've been impressed by Apple is not only do they have the budget to do these amazing technical things, but story-wise, because they're doing things that have not been able to been done because of their sponsorship in the past or their constraints of broadcast network, again, that we're beholding to the consumer. And Alex, I will not recommend Ted Lasso to you. You will hate it. But I got completely absorbed into, and once you get past the first few episodes, they find their rhythm and you start really get compelled into the characters. The ending, it got me. It hooked me right in. And then, of course, the broadcast show, that was a drama and a half. And again, with stellar acting.
Yeah. I think the problem is, and this is a challenge for media folks in general, is that a bunch of us that have just kind of given up on a lot of the new stuff. We've gone back to the old ones. So we're like slowly working through. I just finished Heroes, and now we're Lost.
I'm watching Silicon Valley again because
I'm watching Lost for the next 8 months or something like that. So it's
IT crowd.
We've just kind of gone like, not that interested. Like I just feel like everyone's trying too hard. Go ahead, Mike, and then Alex.
Hey, so I took a little offense there. Have you not seen Ted Lasso? Because I think it's one of the best shows I've seen in a long time.
Very good. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm just starting to watch The Sopranos, and I hear it's quite a good show.
Yeah, there you go. And again, because I have so little time, I watch I think part of the reason that I'm kind of surprised at this is that I have a 11-year-old and a 13-year-old, and we all sit down and we watch a show. And so that show has to be PG or PG-13. And what I was kind of excited about when Apple had promised it and people were complaining that it was all going to be PG, PG-13, I was like, finally, I have a network that I can just turn on and watch with my kids. Then it didn't turn out to be that way, and so then I just turned it off. So I watched Tiny World, but I don't have any time to watch something without the family. So I have an hour to watch every when people ask like how do you do it all, one of the ways that I did it was I stopped watching TV shows. And so I did office hours instead of TV, and so I don't spend a lot of time on TV. I have 1 hour a day, really 45 minutes, so it all has to fit into that hour max, and then I still have 15 minutes of TikTok. And usually if for whatever reason we're busy and we get less than 45 minutes to do a show, then it's just TikTok, and so that's kind of been the where we've kind of taken it. And so I was really disappointed actually with Apple's choice in content. And so I think that I watched Tiny World, but anything that says MA on it is pretty much, I'm not going to watch it. Next question.
Moving on, Robert Barrow, Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. How is the host cutting the show?
Taylor is pinning. And I don't know. I'm curious as to whether the spotlight is working on the participant view. I don't know if that's actually happening or not, or if it's getting out there when you're spotlighting.
Oh, it's working.
Okay, there you go. So Taylor's spotlighting and pinning. The hard part with spotlighting is it creates chaos on our end because it takes over our screen. So we try to minimize the amount of spotlighting because I have to keep on clicking. No, not that. And that's a functional problem with Zoom.
Every time somebody spotlights, I have to go back up, take my mouse off where it is, and go back to gallery.
I don't understand why Zoom can't just let me lock to gallery, but evidently that's too complicated.
This is getting kind of fun and interesting. It's kind of fun doing the switching for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to do this or see this. So
very good.
Having fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Cami Vineswig of Redondo Beach says, how is Alex 4D Goldner able to generate so many questions even when he should be in bed?
How is it, Alex?
Getting deep here.
No, I even though I'm not a developer, I find it interesting to be able to know what the developers' concerns are. So I had some idea of what they might be for WWDC.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I think it's because he lives in the fourth dimension.
Yeah, there we go. Next question.
The dimension where time and space go. Anyway, Roscoe Jones says, what out-of-stock gear are you most looking forward to being back in stock again?
Dante cards. Jason.
Yeah, Dante cards, and I would like to not have to compete with someone mining Monero for a decent GPU.
Yeah. I think I was much more. I do need some GPUs for my, and I'm hoping that this whole China thing where they're talking about making it illegal to mine for Bitcoin is going to open up an entire market for us of GPUs. George.
I would just like to say I hope it all comes back, because every morning I wake up now hoping that Blackmagic see and tweet from Blackmagic saying there's an event. As long as we don't get able to get electronics, we won't see any releases from them.
NAB in October.
Well, I think Blackmagic has moved past it. Like they're just kind of like we're going to release them whenever they're going to release them, which is a new thing. Next question.
TJ Asher, Minneapolis, Minnesota. We used to show the panel while the questions were being read so we could see people thinking, scrunching our faces. Has that paradigm changed for Office Hours 2.0?
I think that's just because Taylor's cutting and he's decided
Taylor's on top of it.
Yeah, Taylor, that hasn't changed. So Taylor, we just haven't given Taylor that input that some people want to see the panel when the questions being asked, so they get to see everybody there. So there's and it does give us a nice opportunity to take a breath and just kind of see everybody that's there. So but that's just because Taylor took over and he has his own way of approaching it. So
well, I will say I used to do that all the time, cut in and out from viewing everybody to a single shot, and then I got feedback saying I was switching too much. So I haven't found my happy medium yet. So
find your flow. You're never going to please everybody.
Yeah, exactly. No, go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, I think if Bill's in the correct position in the gallery view for the show that's going out, then when Bill does ask the question, it's like he's asking the question to the group of us, which he is. So it is a really nice thing to see Bill in the gallery view. As long as Bill's in the right, you don't want Bill in the bottom right corner. You want Bill to be probably top center and Alex top left.
But everybody can put me wherever they want me. I mean, if you don't put me in the corner.
Not going to YouTube. Going out to YouTube, you can choose where we put you. Right. So having you and Alex are the two that we keep on bouncing to. So knowing where you are in the gallery view, we can go straight to you when you ask a question rather than having to find you as you ask a question. Yeah. That was quite nice. But yeah, it is up to the person who's cutting the show to have a bit of an aesthetic feel too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
I tried to be quick about this, but I can't be fast enough. I tried to leave Bill spotlighted or pinned and switch you out, Alex, between you and the person who is answering the question, but constantly leaving Bill on screen. But I haven't quite found a rhythm to click fast enough.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me uncomfortable. I just have to really watch out about.
Yeah. You go ahead, George.
So, quick question. So, if you know ahead of time you're going to be cutting the show, is it better to log in to use Zoom OSC? That way, if you know Bill is asking the question, you could just program it in your Stream Deck or program Alex in your Stream Deck. That way, you're able to cut between those two. I
think that we're gonna do more with Zoom OSC as we move forward in a whole lot of different levels, and so we'll play with that. In the end, yeah, probably easier to have someone do that. But right now, we want to keep on being able to know that we can do it with a mouse. So anyway, thanks to everyone thanks to our panelists who kept this conversation going. Also, if you are watching this and you're wondering, how do all these people get in? You can actually, there's a link that you can sign up and end up in Mukana. We don't really see the comments and questions from YouTube. so if you're talking amongst yourselves in there, you're talking along Mukana there, and you can actually, the back door into Mukana now is just going through the website. So if you go to officehours.global and sign up there, you just go through the system. So you can do that as well. So there you go. But if you're making comments on YouTube, we don't really see those. So that's not something that we're paying much attention to. Anyway, thanks to our viewers and to our producers who are asking all the questions and moving the conversation down the path, and also thanks to our great panelists who keep the conversation rolling. We're going to go ahead and shut the live stream off. This is a little different than what we normally do, which is we'll shut the live stream off and then we'll move on to the post show.